Last year, MI5 believed it had uncovered a Russian spy at the very heart of British democracy, inside the House of Commons.
If MI5 did not take this sort of thing seriously, we'd want our money back, and we'd be entitled to get our money back.
The 26-year-old Russian, Katya Zatulivyacha, was accused of being the eyes and ears of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. Were you a honey trap spy?
No. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
In her only interview, she talks about being an innocent victim, targeted by MI5. But spies, Russian spies, are very skillful.
I've never met any, I don't know.
And the MP who was her lover has hit back furiously at the security service.
She felt like she was a hunted animal, and I can understand that.
The court has upheld Katya's case and she will not be deported. But the question that will now be asked is, why was this case brought in the first place, and how, on the face of it, did MI5 get it so wrong? On Tuesday, Katya's long battle to avoid deportation and clear her name ended in victory. She'd taken her appeal to the Special Immigration Appeals Commission, SIAC. It deals with sensitive cases of national security, and some of the evidence is heard in secret. This is the first espionage case the court has ruled on. And what did the verdict mean to you?
Everything. I would have been branded as a spy forever.
At the heart of the story is a tantalizing question. Was Katya an innocent abroad, or a long-term sleeper for Russian intelligence? Were her relationships genuine, or was she a honey trap spy? Is the honey trap purely a Hollywood fiction?
No, gosh, no, it's not. Of course it's not. It's only fiction for governments and countries that play by some kind of sense of rules, whatever that may be. Honey trap is used extensively.
The fact is that a honey trap spy represents a very real and present threat. Gullibility must come into it by definition, because, you know, what sensible 60-year-old man thinks a 22-year-old woman has found the love of her life in him? I'm not saying it never happens, but it's very, very unlikely.
The story begins in St. Petersburg, where Katya studied international relations. MI5's assessment is that she was recruited here by one of Russia's intelligence agencies when she was a student.
St. Petersburg is a well-known recruiting ground. There will have been people whom everybody knew was from the KGB, the FSB around. They will have watched her, they will have approached her, and they will have invited her in to, for a career chat. Vladimir Putin was recruited there. He let it be known that he wanted to work for the then KGB, and they duly recruited him there.
When you were a student at St. Petersburg University, were you ever approached by anybody from Russian intelligence?
No.
Never?
Never. We were absolutely unaware that there was actually Russian intelligence around us.
Every year, students from the university volunteered to help at an international conference. Katya acted as one of the chaperones. This was how she first met the Liberal Democrat MP, Mike Hancock.
I was working with the British delegation, which consisted of British MPs and lords.
What did Mike Hancock say to you when you chatted to him?
Lots of things.
Did he make advances to you?
Can we make a break?
I met her at a conference in St. Petersburg in 2006. She was bright, intelligent, spoke good English, friendly. That was it.
It was the beginning of a 4-year relationship between the married MP and the young Russian. But Hancock wasn't the first Westerner chaperoned by Katya who would fall for her charms. 2 years earlier, she met a Dutch diplomat at a St. Petersburg conference.
We had a couple of drinks, had dinner at the reception, and exchanged our details. And then next day went for dinner, then theatre.
Did you sleep with him?
Yes.
Did you know what his job was?
He was a Dutch diplomat, that's everything I knew.
Did you ask him about his job?
No.
Spying, the second oldest profession in the world, still relies on human sources to deliver what nothing else can.
People look at technology in the spy business, and because it's sexy, they think it's the center of the universe. I don't care whether it's the 15th century or whether it's the 21st century. If you want to understand intent, you need a human being.
In 2006, Katya moved to the UK. Mike Hancock later gave her a job as his parliamentary researcher. She was vetted and given a parliamentary pass. Now, with a House of Commons pass, Katya was at the heart of Westminster and potentially close to some of its secrets. At Westminster, Mike Hancock was a busy MP with a seat on two important parliamentary bodies, the All-Party Russia Group and the Defence Select Committee. What kind of documents would Mike Hancock have had access to? Would they be confidential documents?
For the most part, it's not seeing some plan of a bomb-making installation or something like on a James Bond episode. It's nothing like that at all. It's what you're trying to do is gain information and knowing who's sleeping with whom, having access to a building where there are lots of other people's researchers, you can get to know them, where most doors a lot of the time are not locked, would be immensely useful to another country's intelligence gathering operation.
Did you see any confidential documents in the course of your work?
Never.
Did Mike Hancock ever show you or give you any confidential documents?
No.
I never hid the fact that Katya was a Russian working for me. Why should I? She was very good at her job, and irrespective of personal relationships, she was the best person for that job.
As well as being Mike Hancock's assistant, Katya was his live-in lover and shared his London flat. She'd been keeping a very personal diary, referring to Hancock as her darling teddy bear. She wrote, "There is no one more tender and sincere than you." Did you love him?
I think we have a judgment on that, and it clearly states that we had a genuine relationship, so I don't think I have to try to respond to that. It's been scrutinized well enough.
Mike Hancock's constituency is in Portsmouth, home to most of Britain's warships and headquarters of Britain's fleet. So the MP for Portsmouth South is in a position to know a lot. MI5, the security service, has an obvious interest in Russians working at the House of Commons. Checks are routine, as the potential for a Russian sleeper spy is always there. MI5 called Katya to set up a meeting.
A man called me. I picked up the phone, my office phone, and he said that he was from Ministry of Defence and he would like to meet me.
Did you meet him?
Yes.
And did he say he was from the Ministry of Defence?
No, not anymore. He now said that he was from MI5.
Her visitor wanted to know if she'd had any contact with people at the Russian embassy.
Together with him, we went through all my business cards, and then he found the card of Boris.
The business card that interested MI5 most belonged to a man working at the Russian embassy in Kensington. MI5 were concerned about this individual as they suspected he was one of the many spies working undercover at the embassy. He was referred to in court as Boris.
My understanding is that she was picked up by MI5 not because there was any smoking gun evidence against her, not because she was found carrying documents, secret documents out of Parliament, or, you know, had a memory stick about her person, but because she was making contact with a Russian intelligence officer in the Russian embassy in Kensington, in whom MI5 were already taking an interest.
Katya had originally met Boris from the embassy at a conference in London. He subsequently struck up a conversation with her at a nearby underground station. Do you think he was targeting you?
I am questioning it now. I think maybe.
Katya says that she told Mike Hancock about her encounter with Boris, and he told her not to have anything to do with him.
There are lots of Russians in London, some of them desirable and some of them very undesirable. And she had to make her own judgments on lots of people, but this was a specific operative working inside the Russian community in the embassy. And I felt that would be completely inappropriate for her to meet them.
Although the Cold War ended over 20 years ago, relations between Russia and the UK are still characterised by mutual suspicion. MI5 says that the number of Russian intelligence officers in London is up to Cold War levels. The most dramatic recent evidence of Russian activity in London was the murder by poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko.
Every day you could see he became worse. Every day it was fight for life.
He'd been an outspoken critic of the then President Putin. In Moscow, the former Russian intelligence officer suspected of the killing, Andrei Lugovoy, is now a Putin-supporting politician, elected to Russia's parliament.
Я официально продолжаю оставаться в розыске, не только для Скотланд-Ярда, но как бы для британской правоохранительной системы. Я нахожусь в розыске Интерпола, Wanted, соответственно. Но каких-то таких действий для того, чтобы узнать что-то дополнительное по этому делу, к сожалению, не предпринимали.
Following Litvinenko's killing, he believes that Katya is simply a pawn in the wider game between British and Russian intelligence.
Мне кажется, происходит некая такая, не знаю, может быть, демонстрация для других, как бы, будущих задержанных сотрудников спецслужб, что вот можно как бы без суда человека в течение 10 месяцев держать в подвешенном состоянии и не высылать ее, и не оставлять, ограничивать ее отношения, ее взаимоотношения, ее общение с близкими, я так понимаю, видимо, и с родственниками, с друзьями.
The idea that at the end of the day, the Russia we're living with is in many ways not that different from the old Soviet Union, and all the problems we had with that old Soviet Union is very, very chilling. And frankly, if MI5 did not take this sort of thing seriously, we'd want our money back, and we'd be entitled to get our money back.
In 2010, Mike Hancock ended his relationship with Katya, and Katya moved out of his flat. She then met her next lover, a high-ranking German NATO official whom she met at another London conference. He was in his 50s. Did you know what he did?
Yes.
Did you talk about his work with NATO?
No.
Did you sleep with him?
Yes.
Were you a honey trap spy?
No. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It would have been a much more interesting story if I was.
In the summer of 2010, alarm bells from across the Atlantic rang in MI5 headquarters. The FBI had uncovered a sleeper cell of 10 Russians who'd been living all-American lives, unsuspected, in the United States. The most prominent Russian recruit to the cell was Anna Chapman, who'd once been married to a British citizen. On her return to Moscow, Chapman was greeted as a Russian hero, cashing in on her newfound fame with a series of photo shoots. She even went on to host her own TV show.
All I'm gonna say is I'm interested in helping other people. That's all.
That was a very disturbing case because it was clear the Russians were putting a great deal of money into developing long-term sleeper penetration agents at a young age who could be expected one way or another to grow into the fabric of American political culture.
But Katya was different. She was living quite openly under her own name and was known to the intelligence services. She says that she cooperated with them fully. In August 2010, Katja was returning home from a holiday in Croatia with a group of female friends. It was her birthday and they'd been away to celebrate.
It was midnight. They were waiting for me there to arrive. They knew that I would arrive.
Katja was taken away and interviewed by two MI5 officers.
They showed me a picture of my then boyfriend, which made me laugh because I couldn't understand why they would be interested in my relationships.
Katja's boyfriend at the time was the senior German official who worked for NATO. What was the tone of the interviews?
It started neutral, but very quickly it went into aggressive. You're sitting in the middle of the night. You don't know exactly where you were brought by the car. There were people screaming at you. You have no idea what's going on.
How were you feeling?
I can't even describe, petrified.
Katja says that the screaming was done by a man, whereas in subsequent interviews conducted in a series of upmarket London hotels, a woman adopted a very different approach.
She tried to be friendly, talking about herself a lot, her son, for example, the books she read.
Did you realise what she was trying to do, the way she was operating?
Yes, but I didn't mind that. I'd rather have that than somebody screaming at me that I'm a liar.
MI5's interviews with Katja continued over a period of months towards the end of 2010.
The scariest part of this interrogation was that I've seen that these people were unprofessional and paranoid. Everything they've seen in Russian people was a spy. If you're Russian in this country, you're a spy. They could not understand how a Russian in London can speak English language. That was one of the questions they were querying. They believe that if you're Russian, the only way you can learn English language is in some kind of spy school.
Katja's former lover was also invited to meetings with MI5.
I invited them to come to my office in the Commons. They didn't want to do that. I said, well, I'll come to Thames House and meet you at your headquarters. They didn't want to do that. They said, oh, we'd rather meet you in a hotel. So they had this rather bizarre arrangement where I go to a hotel, I find them in a room, and then I go into the room and they lock the door. I didn't like some of the questions they asked because they were of a personal nature, but I had nothing to hide, so I answered them all truthfully. What I found strange was each time I tried to probe, what is this about? What is the allegation? They wouldn't say. They didn't say, and I think it was because they didn't know what to say. And I think that was rather pathetic.
Katja discovered that she would be invited to meet at one hotel and then be asked to go to another, slightly less grand. The Savoy became the Strand Palace. Although Katja wasn't to know it, this was to be her final interview with the security service. It appears that by this stage, MI5's investigation was almost complete.
I had a knock on my door, 7 in the morning. I opened my door. There were 5 people standing outside my door with a light in my face. They came in, they asked for my passport. They didn't even look at it. They put it in their pocket and said that I have to dress and pack up and we're leaving, and I will be leaving this country shortly.
At the beginning of December last year, Katja was served with deportation papers on the grounds that her presence in the United Kingdom was considered a threat to national security.
A Russian woman working for a senior Liberal Democrat MP is arrested on suspicion of espionage. MI5 raised concerns about the 25-year-old graduate. She now faces deportation.
Katja was determined to fight her case and decided to appeal. She had to do so through the Special Immigration Appeals Commission. On the face of things, MI5's case looked strong.
MI5 thought you were a spy. They didn't make it up.
I can't imagine anybody would believe, based on their case, that I was a spy.
I think they probably believed it
given the knowledge of how the Russian intelligence services work. And you seem to be the perfect case, the perfect profile, given your relationship with a series of powerful political and security and diplomatic figures, including an MP.
I don't know what they know about the Russian intelligence. I don't know much about Russian intelligence. I've learned quite a lot during this process, but still my knowledge is very limited.
Nick Fielding was chosen as an expert witness by Katya's legal team. Isn't it perhaps a little more than coincidence that amongst her lovers were a Dutch diplomat, a NATO official and a British Member of Parliament?
That is not the extent of her relationships, according to the evidence presented to court, and there were other people who were not involved in these kind of areas of work and who had very, very mundane occupations and don't fit that pattern at all.
But she still had sexual relationships with a Dutch diplomat, a NATO official and a British MP.
That's absolutely true. On the other hand, she was somebody who was a student of foreign relations. That was her degree and her postgraduate degree, and she was mixing in precisely those circles.
Katya and her legal team took a momentous decision in a desperate bid to convince the three judges, one of whom was a former Director General of MI5. This involved revealing the contents of her highly personal diaries. When you decided to appeal against your deportation, did you realise that it would entail revealing much of the intimate details of your private life in public?
Yes.
And you were prepared to do that?
I had to wait the two options I had. One is that I will be forever branded a spy, but will be able to keep my private life private, or I had to give all of this out into press and into the public, but be able to prove that I'm not a spy. And for me, more important was to prove that I'm not a spy.
The only way we could try to win this case was by really giving the court an avalanche of evidence about Katya's life, about her relationships, about what she's done over the past 10 years, to show and to try to prove a negative, which is that she is not and never was a Russian spy.
I was crying in my lawyer's office, was absolutely prepared to be humiliated by the press, by everybody around me, yes.
The appeal hearing lasted for 9 days. Having decided to reveal her personal thoughts in her diaries, Katya was taken aback when their authenticity was questioned. But if you had been a spy, it's reasonable to think that you would have written the diary as part of your cover.
It would be incredible, would be very skillful.
But spies, Russian spies, are very skillful.
I've never met any, I don't know.
Katya's diaries became crucial evidence. When the judge declared them to be genuine, MI5's case started to unravel. In closing arguments, Katya's lawyers said that the MI5 investigation was more akin to Inspector Clouseau than George Smiley.
The senior case officer in this case had only been with the counterintelligence department since the spring of 2010. She didn't speak Russian. She wasn't sure how many people in her team even spoke Russian. She told the court that she had received effectively on-the-job training in counterintelligence. All these things point to somebody who doesn't have a huge background and a great deal of knowledge about the way in which the Russian intelligence services operate. And I think that is a little bit disturbing to me.
How do you regard the way in which MI5 have handled your case and brought your case?
Extremely unprofessional. I was absolutely shocked. I can understand that they would have suspicion about me as a Russian working in parliament, about my relationships as well. But suspicions is not everything. You have to find evidence.
The security services case was found to be wanting at every stage. The last year has been a Kafkaesque nightmare.
Although the court vindicated Katya, the judgment criticised her character. It described her as immature, calculating, emotional and self-centred, but her supporters have hit back.
I'm absolutely delighted but disgusted about the time it's taken and the way the security services have acted, as well as the way in which senior politicians within the Home Office has acted on this issue.
They had a pig-headed adherence to their belief, and reasonable suspicion isn't enough. And once that reasonable suspicion is met with evidence which suggests very strongly that she is not and never was a Russian spy, they should have reconsidered their case.
The more that MI5 is demoralised, the more it's laughed at, the more it's seen as unnecessary in today's world, the greater the chance for those who would do us harm or simply want to know sensitive things about us to get their way.
Although there will be disappointment at the Home Office that it has lost a high-profile case, the mood at MI5 headquarters is likely to be more sanguine. They feared that Katya was a long-term Russian spy, and though they couldn't prove it, she has now been burned and rendered inoperative. To MI5, despite the inevitable embarrassment, it's job done.
It was an extremely unfair process. I think if I can describe it in war terms, it would be me on a horse with a sword against tanks and aircrafts. So not for a second, actually, I thought that there was a possibility that I could win.
Spying is a world of assessments and suspicions. The court accepted it could have been hoodwinked by a supremely competent spy, but thought it unlikely. Katya has given her answer. And on Panorama next Monday, secret shopping. Do supermarket price wars really save you money?
It's not best value.
We investigate whether so-called deals really cost you more.
If you thought it was cold here during the winter, then how about -50? The humans who live in the extreme parts of our frozen planet next.